I've created some practice problems that can help you put into practice what we've gone over in these past modules about pivot tables. There's a file that you can download below that just says product data, which is this raw file with our data that you see here, with 7 questions designed to put into practice what we went over about pivot tables. There's also a file down below that's called product data-finished, which is the file with all of the answers that I'll walk through in the following videos. Feel free to download the product data file and try these out on your own and then watch the videos, or you can watch the videos along with me if that works better for you. So to start off, let's look at our sample data. Here we have some orders data for the year 2021. We've got order date, order number, the state that it was sold in, the product line and product code, the quantity for the order, revenue per unit, total revenue, cost per unit, and total cost. So we have a bunch of questions related to this data. As you can see, we've got over 1,200 lines here. So lots of data. Pivot tables make a lot of sense for something like this. So let's move over to question 1, which says to create a table that shows total revenue by product and then asks us what was the top selling product and how many units were sold. These questions are made to kind of follow a pattern that you would see in the workplace of producing a report or a document or answering a question that could come up. And one thing I'll just point out right now, I'm going to show you a way to do things in Excel and with pivot tables. There are lots of ways that you can do certain things. So just because I do it one way doesn't mean that's the only way to do it. So to start off, we'll create a pivot table. We'll come to this Insert ribbon and click Pivot Table. It's automatically selected all the data for us. We can see the dotted line that's going around it. Typically, we could just throw this in a new worksheet, but I'm actually going to put it in the existing worksheet that we already had so that we have the question right above it, and then select OK. So here we've got the pivot table, and we want to show total revenue by product. So total revenue is something that we're going to be reporting on, so we'll drag that into the values section. And we want to have this by product. So we're going to take the product field and click it down into the rows. Now, I always want to see my numbers formatted, so you can come here to value settings and choose number format, number. You don't have to do it this way, but I just like to see commas. So now we've got a pivot table with all of our products and our revenue. And the question was, what was the top selling product and how many units were sold? So we can sort this by right-clicking and sort largest to smallest. And we can see that MP87 was the product that sold the most. But this question also asks how many units were sold. So we're going to have to do something more than just revenue. We're going to have to come in here and look at quantity as well. So we'll pull in quantity, and the quantity for that MP87 was 46,490 units. Okay, so now moving on to question 2 here. It says create a table that shows total orders, units, and cost by month for RS65. Which month had the highest number of units sold? So I won't go through and create a pivot table again, since that's a fairly easy thing to do. But we're going to want to show orders, units, and cost by month. So to get the total orders, we're going to pull in order number. And then to get the total units, we would pull in quantity. And then the cost, we'll pull in total cost. And I will quickly format these numbers as well. Now, you can see that the pivot table is summing all of these things, which makes sense for our quantity and our total costs. But our order number, based on our data, it's just kind of a numeric number that is given to each order, so it doesn't really make sense to add those up, so we need to change this to a count. In the course, I showed you how to do that through value field settings by right-clicking and coming into value field settings. You can also right-click and there's this option to summarize values by or show values as. So we'll just do that a little quicker. And then we want to show this by month. So let's pull in the order date as well. If you pull that into the rows, then it automatically groups the order date by month. And we want to show this for only one product. So we're going to have to put the product name or product number into this filter section. So we can come in here and we'll type RS65, select that, and now we have the total orders and units and the total cost for each month. And then the question is, which month had the highest number of units sold? And number of units sold, we can sort this largest to smallest, and we see that August was the highest order month. One thing to note here, we put the months in the rows. You could have also put the months in the columns. And what this is showing is you've got your month and it's showing the order number, the quantity, and the total cost all for August. And then it's showing the same thing for March and May, etc. One thing to make it a little easier to do, you can see it created the values field right here. So you can actually move that down to the rows. And now you have within your rows the individual values. So this is just another way that you could have produced a similar pivot table. Okay, the next question is show the average price per unit, max price per unit, and min price per unit for each product. Which product has the lowest min price per unit? So here we're going to take the price per unit, which is the revenue per unit, and we're going to stick it in the values section, and we'll format it real quick. Now we want to first show the average price per unit, so we'll come here and then summarize values as, and we'll show the average. Maybe we can increase the decimal right there. Now we also want to show the max price per unit and the min price per unit. So we can actually drag this field over to the value section again and change this so it's a max, and do the same thing and change this so it's a min. Now we want to show this for each product, so we'll bring the product into the rows, and now we have that data point for every product that we sell. And then the question here is which product has the lowest min price per unit? We can easily find that by sorting this smallest to largest. So TJ33 has the lowest min price per unit in our data set. So the next question here is what effect does winter weather have on total units sold in Minnesota? This question is a little more ambiguous, and it might be a question that you would receive from a manager who's wanting to know kind of, what effect could weather patterns have. Now, obviously, weather isn't directly in this data, but we could look at things by month and figure things out. So let's bring in order date to the rows, and this will summarize things by month. Some of the older versions of Excel might actually not group these by month automatically, like I showed in the training. And if that's the case, you can just right-click and group. If you wanted to show these by date rather than by month, you could click ungroup, and it would show you all of the individual dates that are in the data. We'll group that by month. And we want to look at total units sold, so we're going to come over here and put the quantity in here. And we want to know specifically for the state of Minnesota. So we'll come in here to the state, and For those not familiar, the abbreviation for Minnesota is MN. And here you can see that there's only 6 months where we actually had sales, and looks like there were no sales within the winter months. So there were no sales in November, December, January, or February. So it looks like winter has a very adverse effect on the units sold in Minnesota because there weren't any, at least in 2021. Okay, the next question asks us to create a table showing data with product line, product, total revenue, total costs, and total profit. Also calculate profit as a percentage of revenue, and then asks which product had the highest profit percentage in each division. So to start off, we'll add some of these criteria to the rows. So we want product line, and we want product as well. And total revenue would be in the value section, and then total costs as well. Now to calculate the total profit, you can see that's not a field that we actually have. So we're going to have to calculate this field. So we come over to the Analyze tab, and we can add a calculated field. Profit is simply going to be the revenue minus the costs. So here in the name, we'll type profit. And then the formula is just going to be total revenue minus total cost. And then we'll click OK. And so now we've added that calculated field. And then it also asks us to calculate profit as a percentage of revenue. So we're going to add another calculated field here, and we're going to call this profit percentage. And the formula is going to be our profit, which is a new field in our list. Even though it's a calculated field, we can still use it and reference it. So we're going to do our profit divided by our total revenue, and then click OK. And now this is showing the percentage of our profit related to our revenue. Now we'll come in here and do some formatting so it's a little easier to see. Maybe add a decimal point there. And then it says which product has the highest profit percentage in each division. So we can right click on the profit percentage, and we can sort this largest to smallest. Now you'll notice that what it's doing here is this is grouped by product line, and so within each product line it's put the highest percentage at the very top, which is handy for what we needed. Like I talked about in the other modules of this course, this is a pivot table that defaults to the compact form here. This is what it would look like in outline form, where we break out the product line in a different column from the product. And then same thing, if you wanted to add tabular, it kind of cleans things up a bit. One thing you could do is you could just create a normal table. This is kind of the way I like to see my data typically. And you'll notice this is more or less just a table of data now, but it's still grouped by product line. And even if you sort largest to smallest like we did before, it's going to keep the sorting within the product line because that's kind of how we grouped it in this report. Now we need to show revenue by state and also add a slicer to easily filter on product line. And then we need to answer the question, which state sold the most in the PR product line? So this is a fairly simple pivot table. We're going to bring in state into the rows and total revenue to show revenue by state. And now we need to add a slicer on the product line. As we talked about, you can come here into the Analyze tab and then insert a slicer. and then it's going to ask us what field we want to add a slicer to. Based on the prompt here, we need to add a slicer to the product line. So we'll check just product line and click OK. And now we have this little box that shows up where we can select different product lines. Again, you can hold the Control key to select multiple, or click this box to select multiple as well. And the question that was asked is, what state has sold the most in the PR product line? So we will clear this filter and just select PR. And then we can sort largest to smallest, and California is the answer. Okay, the last question here says, for the product JH80, show the number of units sold at each revenue per unit price. Then asks us what's the most frequent price that JH80 sold at, and then asks us to get a detail of all transactions at that price. So because we're only looking at one product, we will put product in the filter here and do JH80. And then we want to see the number of units sold. So that would be the quantity that we would put in the value. And then this is specifically asking us to look at the revenue per unit price. So the revenue per unit is actually the value that we want to show in the rows section. So what this data is showing is we sold 2,170 units at the price point of $23.74. And you can see all the various price points that we sold at and the quantities. So this is one way you can look at like per unit data, is by putting it in the rows. Typically when you have revenue, you would put it in the values, but on a per unit basis, you might want to look at it in the rows section like we have here. So this question is asking what's the most frequent price. So we would again sort this largest to smallest, and it looks like $34.84 is the most frequent price that we've sold this at. And then it asks us to get a detail of all the transactions at that price. Now this is something that we didn't go over in the other course modules, but it's something that's fairly simple and very handy. You can actually double click any value in a pivot table and get the detail behind it. So we'll double click that number right there, and it comes up with a table with the 3 rows of our original data that add up to the total quantity. So again, we had our quantity of 5,460 units, and on this sheet we highlight those rows and we get 5,460 units. We can come to our data here and put filters on by Control-Shift-L and filter on JH80 in the product section, and in the revenue per unit, $34.84, and we get those same 3 lines that we saw when we double clicked. But obviously this filtering takes a while, so just double clicking on any item in a pivot table can get you the detail really quick. So this is a great way if you had additional questions around specific lines in your pivot table, you can just double click and get the detail.